Hello. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today. We are all meeting on the lands of our First Nations people as we online learn and share stories. Where I am, I would like to acknowledge the Gaiba and Jarawar people, and I ask you to do the same wherever you are. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future. Around this time last year, I was in Amsterdam. I was at an event and I was talking to some amazingly passionate people. And I was telling them about my Winston Churchill Fellowship. Now, on this Churchill Fellowship, I traveled around the world and I was researching smart mobility and what that means for our smart communities. So I was telling them where I was going and I said that I'd been to Mexico City. And one guy pipes up, "Do you know what the biggest problem that they were having on the Mexican metro was?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, it only affected women." Okay, I thought safety, I guess. He said, "Well, yes, but not in the way you might be thinking." And I was like, "Okay, tell me more." And he said they were having a really big issue with women giving birth on the floor of the train carriages. And I thought, wow, how is this possible? These poor women, they're obviously trying to get to the hospital, and the metro is their only way of transport. And obviously babies just come whenever they're ready, let alone the metro being overcrowded and delayed. And he said, well, that's what the government thought as well. But it was happening so regularly that they had to investigate. So they investigated, they started to look at the data, they asked the women involved. And it turns out that the women were actually choosing to go to the metro when they were due to give birth. And I thought, why would anybody do that? When you buy your ticket for the Mexican metro, it's only a couple of pesos. You also get health insurance for the duration of your journey. And I thought, wow, these women are very clever. So I said to my friend, what did they do about this? What did the government do about this? And according to him, instead of, changing the policy, they could have sent the women away, many different things they could have done. Instead of doing that, they actually put midwives and nurses on the train carriages. This is according to him. And I thought, wow, the future of transport, meeting the real needs of our community. Now, I start with this story because we need to start having smart community conversations that don't start with technology, but actually they start with the real needs of the community. Because the future of our communities belongs to us and the decisions that we make right now. My name is Zoe Ether. I'm the CEO and founder of My Smart Community and also the host of the Smart Community podcast. Now, that means that I do whatever it takes to shape and influence the smart city conversation to be a smart community one. Because when we start with technology, we can't actually solve the problems of our community, which is the whole reason that the smart community conversation should exist. Now, this includes involving the people with the most at stake. Now, I work with all levels of government, regulatory authorities, and industry on the smart community concept because they know that it's more than just technology, and focusing on the latest tech just won't cut it anymore. So we have to be engaging with and meeting the needs of our communities. Now, the communities are our largest stakeholder, and with a disengaged community, we're pretty much on a collision course for destruction. Now, I ignite smart community thinking from the regions to the world. And I do this through speaking, facilitating, and strategic consulting. I'm also the founder and host, as I mentioned, of the Smart Community podcast. And I do offer smart community consulting. So that's enough about me. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I'm going to share a little bit about smart communities, as well as some examples that I've seen on my travels. So where did I start? So I started in construction. I was on the road building infrastructure. I'm an engineer and I worked in civil construction for many years. But then I really wanted to work overseas. So I ended up working and living in South Korea for 3 months. And that's where I learned about the smart city concept. This is my very first smart city event. But what I realized about the smart city concept is it was very interesting, but I was trying to work out what the purpose was. What was the reason we needed this smart city thing? So when I came back to Australia, I would talk to anyone and everyone about this smart city thing to find out what they thought or what we were doing in this space. And I was working for the state government at the time, and I was working in the Cooperative and Automated Vehicle Initiative. So we're looking at self-driving cars, connected vehicles. This is my good friend, Michael Milford, who I've interviewed on my podcast a couple of times now. But basically what I was looking for is a more integrated approach. So I wanted to work more in smart cities where we were looking at the different ways that things could connect together, the data that we could use, and actually make a real difference to our local communities. So I decided to leave my good secure government job and start the Smart City podcast at the time. It's now the Smart Community podcast, and then also my Smart Community. A smart community has to be human and diverse. So we have to be thinking about the humans involved in this conversation. And we need a diverse approach, a diverse range of people making decisions and engaging people from diverse backgrounds. That's both professionally and in the community. We need it to be livable and well. What things could actually improve quality of life? How can we be living better? How can we make sure that our communities are happy and healthy? The next one is empowered and informed. And this is one of my favorites because it's actually about the citizen. How are they going to be informed to be able to make empowered decisions? So what information do they not have now that they could access to be able to make informed decisions about their lives going forward? And they need to be empowered to do this. And that goes back to how we're going to work together, how the government, industry, and community are going to work together. The next is resourceful and connected. So in order to actually access a smart community, to be involved in a smart community, we need to be connected. That's both from a physical or a digital standpoint as well as a human standpoint. So we've got, physical connection. Can we get around? Can we move? All those type of things. But also, do we have digital connection? Are we able to access the internet in a reliable way? Now more than ever, this is important. And then resourceful. This is about using our resources wisely. Are we wasting resources just because we haven't found a better way to do things? Can we do things? Can we improve the efficiency? Got accessible and inclusive. This needs to be accessible, again, from a physical standpoint, but also a digital one. What's digital literacy like in our communities? What are we doing to actually make sure that the information is not only available, but people know how to access it? And inclusive. It's one thing to be diverse, but is everybody included in the conversation? We've got sustainable and circular. So this is all about not just environmental sustainability, that's a key component, and particularly with the circular economy, making sure that we're using our resources in a circular way, not just a use and dispose way. So what are the things that we can do with what we used to call, or what we still call waste? How can we use that again? Are the business models working? All those type of things. So we're integrated and open. So we're integrating across the different disciplines, government and industry, as well as having open data. So around this time last year as well, I was on my Winston Churchill Fellowship. As you can see, I traveled around the world to find out what people were thinking and talking about in smart mobility and how that affects our communities. Now, what I realized was that we're all suffering with similar problems, no matter where we are from and what we're doing. But it's all in a different context. We're all tackling things in different ways. We all have different priorities, but we are all talking about pollution, congestion, access to public transport, inefficiencies in the public transport network, and how we can actually work together for the future. What are we thinking about the future? And what I realized was there's lots of things we are talking about, but there's a lot of things we aren't talking about enough. And I developed this framework so then we can actually start asking the questions that we're not asking yet. So we start with a vision. What's the vision for our communities? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? So we're not starting with technology, we're going to start with the problem. What's the data that's available and what action are we going to take? And then we go around the circle again. And around the outside is the other things that we need to support our smart community framework. So we've got different heads. So that's about diversity, both in decision making and in engagement with the community. We've got headspace. Do we have time to think about these things? This isn't just business as usual. This is something different. And for whom? Who are we actually planning for? Making sure that we're including the people with the most at stake. In the driver's seat. So who is actually in the driver's seat? For me, government has to be in the driver's seat for a lot of these initiatives. And so are we working with them? Better than one. That's that we can't do it alone. We have to integrate across the different disciplines, governments and industry, as well as academia. There's a saying that no one knows anything, but actually I think it's no one knows everything. And so we have to work together to be able to make a smart community a reality. And the whole system. So are we thinking holistically? Are we thinking about our environmental impacts? Are we thinking about the whole of life? Are we thinking about how this could work in a circular economy? And we need to stop because data is so important. So it's data time. We really need to look at our data, work out what data we already have, what we need to collect, what we need to continue to collect to measure and monitor what's happening so then we can actually make real decisions, data-driven decisions. So for this hackathon, I put together a few different examples, and these won't necessarily be super high-tech things. So it's really important that we actually start with solving a problem. So for me, this one is a really exciting one, and it's not super new, it's actually quite old. But basically in Barcelona, they have this thing called a super block. And what they were able to do, and actually it was many years ago now, they were able to reduce the movement of vehicles through a certain block, through a certain size of block, and then they were able to open up the streets to pedestrians and cyclists, as you can see here. And anyone that needs to go into that block has to be a resident, and it's 10 kilometres an hour that they have to drive. You've got playground in the middle of an intersection here. You've got, in that picture there, you've got a university. You've also got access to a whole bunch of different services that you can actually walk and cycle to. And then it's connected to other blocks by public transport. Now, the problem they're trying to solve is in Barcelona, they have this issue of extreme density and not enough space for people to be able to get out and do the things, exercise, hang out with their family, friends, etc. Obviously not doing that at the moment. But basically then they don't necessarily need a car because they're able to walk and cycle to the different services they need, and also then able to catch public transport to some of the things that aren't available in their super block. These are shared vehicles, shared bicycles as well in this super block. Now, the other thing from a technology perspective is they are able to use these super blocks as kind of test beds for new technology. 5G, for example, they've got they're testing out that in one of the areas. They're testing out different waste mechanisms and using the data to actually make decisions about where the next super block should be, or where they should implement something else in the current super block. The next one is not from my church or fellowship, but recently I was in the US. This is from Columbus. So they have an organization called Smart Columbus. They actually won a grant from the federal government to be able to do this. And what Smart Columbus does is actually integrates across different disciplines, which is really great. So when I was meeting with them, there was government in the room, there was private sector, there was actually different levels of government, Smart Columbus, And what they're able to do is they're actually able to do projects together because they've got this integrated approach. That's really important. And the projects that they're doing are actually meeting the needs of the community. So, for example, they did test out an autonomous vehicle because it's all about mobility. And instead of just having, they first tested the autonomous vehicle in the city area, but actually they wanted to move it to a neighborhood where it would actually be a means of transport for people that didn't have it before. They were able to engage with the community. They asked them where the bus should go, and so it went to a number of different spots and community centres that they wouldn't have been able to come up with on their own. So that community engagement really meant that they were able to, the bus that they were able to bring into the community will actually make a real difference. So this is a really exciting project to be able to use that, super sexy, smart, autonomous vehicle, but actually in a way that's going to help people that didn't have access to the network before. For me, that's really important. The next one we've got here is from the San Francisco Bay Area, actually in Silicon Valley. Now you can see there's a autonomous vehicle here, but that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is Udacity, which is, and I have no affiliations with them, and it's not necessarily they're the only people doing this, but they're actually teaching people the skills of the future. So how to code an autonomous vehicle through an online format. And that's not super new, but actually being able to appreciate that not everyone can go to San Francisco to learn this stuff. You're actually increasing that diversity, so people that in all different countries are able to learn these skills because we know that they're going to be the skills of the future. And so I think that that's a really important point, that we really need to be thinking, well, what are the skills that are needed for the future, and how can we use technology right now to help us develop those? The last one here, or second last one, is from South Korea. So this is in Jeju Island, and they've really made Jeju Island a hotspot, or a test bed for connected vehicle technology as well as electric vehicle technology. So I think half of all of the vehicles, electric vehicles in Korea, are actually on Jeju Island, which is a small island off the coast of Korea, off the coast of South Korea. Now, this is an electric bus, and you can see that little device up there is a connected device. So basically, that's sharing information with the bus as well as the back end system, so it can know where the bus is, what the different traffic conditions are like. It can also share messages if there's a hazard ahead. So they were having a lot of issues of tourists coming and hiring a vehicle and getting lost, having traffic accidents, etc. So that was the problem they were trying to solve. Also, horrendous air pollution as well in this area, or in Korea in general. So they were able to solve those problems, or work to solve those problems by testing out new technology, connected technology, and the electric vehicle space. Most of the vehicles that I witnessed on Jeju Island were actually electric, and the hire cars all have this connected technology in there. So then if there is an accident or a crash, people are able to find that vehicle and help those people as well. And they're able to then exchange messages and really test out this technology in a way that's going to help people and increase safety and reduce those emissions. So a really great project, and Jeju Island is just a beautiful place. If you haven't been there, highly recommend you go. The next one, and the last one I'll just talk about very quickly, is open data. So a lot of different places, and these are just some of them, are using open data to really make a difference in citizen engagement, and really opening up that data for public good. So New York City had Open Data Week must have been a month ago now, at least, and we were able to have a webinar with them and talk about some of the things that they're doing. So I really recommend you go and have a look at some of these websites about what data is available and what data sets you could integrate to actually come up with new solutions. So one example in New York City is an advocacy group that's using the bus open data to actually advocate for better bus services in certain areas and how they're going to service different areas and that type of thing. So you can really use it as a citizen, but also as a government agency, being able to integrate different data sources to actually gain insight, create visualizations that you can then talk to your community about, because it's so important that we engage with the community in this space. And while we're on the topic of data, privacy and security have to be key considerations when we are planning and implementing these projects. They can't be an add-on later on. They have to be designed into the solution, into the project itself. So just consider these things when we are talking about sensitive data, different data sources, integration, all these types of things. We really need to ensure that we have that multidisciplinary approach. We have people from the privacy and the security fields involved in these discussions. So just a quick reminder, and hopefully this will be useful for your hack. Really start with that vision. What is it we're trying to achieve? And that can be a high level blue sky kind of vision for the different areas that you're looking at. But then actually look at what the problem is. What's the problem we're trying to solve? And I guess for a hackathon, you might have to create that yourself and work out what you think a problem is, and then you can test and trial that, later on. But then look at the data. So what data do we have available? What's available? What could we collect quite easily? And what data do we need to collect to measure and monitor the results? And then take some action. Which is, you've got your data, so you'll be able to measure and monitor the impact of that action, and then go back around to your vision to see if we're continuing to meet that vision. And then have a think about the outside. So do we have a diversity of skill sets? Are we thinking about how giving ourselves time to think? Who are we planning for? Who's in the driver's seat? What other partners would we need to get involved later on, or right now? What's the whole system? What's our life cycle going to look like? And again, data, it's so important. So finally, my mission is to ignite smart community thinking from the regions to the world. So I really hope that you'll join me on that. Good luck. You can contact me. I'm a mentor. And here's my email address. You can check me out on LinkedIn. And this is also my website. So look forward to talking to you all soon. Bye.